This is at the Green Bridge on the River Carron on the 17th of July 2015. You'll see how this relatively small space is already within a few feet of the road. When you look downstream, you can see why. With all this unnecessary obstruction to the rate of flow down the river, the water simply can't accelerate fast enough to come through under the narrowest point of the river at the bridge before escaping downstream. Now we've gone down to the road bridge looking upstream, and you can see that the river is already reaching the level of the gardens and doesn't have far to go to start some form of flooding or overtopping. This never happened in the old days because with the old wide river mouth, the velocity of flow along this stretch of the river simply didn't allow the water to rise to any extent. Here we're looking downstream from the road bridge, and you can see how much of the river channel has been filled in front of the old walls. And now we're at the beach, and you can see it is virtually at low tide. I'm going to this point at the end of this wall, and from this point to where you see the flag on the other side of the river, that was the end of the river channel, and the river was now free to flow completely unhindered down the beach towards the sea, ever widening and gouging out an ever deeper channel. There's at least 4 feet of water in the river at this point at the moment, but as of old I wouldn't think there would be more than a foot of a rise. Now looking back upstream, you can again see how much of the historic river channel then on both banks of the river. And had the river been able to escape under where I'm standing at the full width of the walls, the height of the water all the way back up the river would have been about 4 feet less. Now we've come down to the present river mouth, which is only some 9.7 metres wide. And you'll, again, having to go round a sharp corner, but as soon as it's onto the beach, you can see how the river widens out, gouges out a channel, and prevents any backup at all, with absolutely no resistance at the original wide river mouth. The water simply poured out at a great velocity, and this is why for 2 centuries we had no flooding in the lower river. Where you see the turbulent water, that's where it passes over the top of the sewer pipe. But it's the restriction in width that causes the problem, not the sewer pipe. You can see there's a bit of motion on the sea at the mouth of the river, but you have to look away to the north before you see any real wave action. This corner at the Carron River mouth is always very well protected. And in the earlier in the video you'll have seen how much rock and how the depth of water is reduced, and the turbulent sea just doesn't get to this end of the bay. And that's why in the centuries previous no waves ever went up the Carron. The waves only went up the Carron after this retaining wall in the foreground was built, and that diverted all waves to run along the face of the wall, and the only escape they had was to go up the river. Now back up at the bridge, looking along the wall up towards the road bridge, you can see how much has been filled into the river channel, reducing the capacity of flow. If you narrow any river, it has to get higher to get the same volume of water out. If it had been flowing at its full width, 16.4 metres from the south wall to the north wall, the river rise would have been only a matter of a foot. Here we're see the 21st of March looking along the beach. That's the spring equinox, and there's a bit of a swell coming onto the beach, and this shows that all the waves coming onto the beach are coming in as a regular equidistant pattern. No compression of waves causing an increase in wave height that JBA's Rivermouth report claims to happen. This is, the claims they make in the report are sheer fantasy. There is no way ever possible that waves can travel 360 metres shoreward over a rock seabed that is not more than 14 feet of water at high tide and pile up at the river mouth. All the power of the waves has been dissipated in that long travel ashore in the shallow water. This groin immediately in front of us was put there as the first attempt to stop the running waves, because the waves were coming in along the rock bank. But in effect, it doesn't do much to prevent the waves coming in, as you see. But what it does do is create a vortex behind the bank, and the seabed from behind this groin is continually being sucked out and carried away seaward. So that all the attempts over the last year that the council have made in transporting shingle from the beach at the river mouth of the River Cowie and trying to fill in this space behind this groin, in a matter of days are all removed again, and you leave the beach simply a bunch of boulders, but all the finer material and shingle has been carried away. This direction the waves are coming in today is the most open to the river mouth. Now this is a still view of the behind that groin, and you can see how the fine sand is gone, only the boulders and rough sand, looking back towards the river mouth with the rock visible outside the groin. That's the same looking across the bay towards the north end of the beach. And that's looking seaward. And you can see it's a long distance of virtually level rock all the way in. And that takes the steam out of any wave action at this end of the bay. These next pictures were taken at low water on the 29th of September, the biggest tide supposedly for a great many years. That's from behind the breakwater. That's looking towards the north and the rocks. This is out from the end of the sewerage emergency outfall. That's the pipeline you can see as we go ashore. That's looking in towards the bay, and you can see that the mouth of the River Carron is away round the corner. There's no waves can come in that direction to cause it any problem. That's at the peak of high tide at that equinox, which was supposed to be the highest tide for something like 20 years, looking up to the road bridge, and again looking further upstream, and you'll notice that the concrete wall at the base of John Briggs's property is still above water. Here we see the mouth of the river in normal times and how it silts up with the north-south drift. Now we're looking towards the north end of the beach and the river mouth. And you can see that the waves as you go further north become ever higher and potentially more threatening. At the river mouth you see the waves running in and you would assume that they might be going up the river. But this just does not happen. The waves do not have the volume or velocity to make any inroad into the river because it is so narrow and so shallow at the river mouth. The waves, as they come up the river, appear to almost halt, but the waves continue running up the beach on either side of the river mouth, and then when the wave retreats, the water pours in to the river from either side, draining off the beach with absolutely no forward momentum. And if you look at the surface of the water as the waves retreat, once it becomes a bit smoother, you'll see that there are ripples coming from either side indicating where the flow has come from. You see the ripples here, how they're coming from each side and meeting in the middle, indicating that the water's pouring into the channel from either side. But there's absolutely no power or momentum and no volume or velocity that would be necessary to be able to enter the river system. The only waves that we have ever been able to detect over the last 5 years while filming has been taking place going up the river are the soliton waves which are generated right at the river mouth, and they are only created for a limited period when the necessary criteria are met. Now we've gone up to the footbridge and looking along the river towards the river mouth. And you see there's absolutely no appearance of waves of disturbance going up the river at all. And this is always the case, unless we've got to have velocity coming down the river being halted by a wave. The downward velocity then piles up and suddenly reaches a point where it reverses its flow and sets off the soliton waves going back up the river. You can clearly see here how the waves on either side of the river mouth can progress further up. But then the water is pouring off the beach into the river mouth, but without any forward velocity. It doesn't have the velocity to reverse the flow in the river. It simply holds it back. And then as soon as the pressure goes off with the incoming wave, the river's pouring seaward again as normal. The illustrations in JBA's Rivermouth Rock Armour report potentially showing that the greatest wave heights and potential trouble lie on the beach in front of the Carron, whether the old Carron River mouth or this existing river mouth, is pure work of fantasy because the conditions simply don't allow it. Here we're looking at from the drone video of the severe storm, and right at the south end of the bay you'll note that there are virtually no waves. Up near the Cowie river end of the beach it's very stormy, and if you look at the end of the breakwater you'll see a large area of white water where the rebounding waves and the waves buffeting off the rocks and the armour behind the rescue centre are in conflict, but they take all the steam out of the waves, and on the shore you'll notice that there is practically no wave action going onto the beach. in the area of the Cowie River mouth at all. You can see virtually a line on the north side of where the rocks finish, and everywhere north of that the rock sea is piling in and going up the beach, but to the south of that line there's virtually very little motion at all, certainly not enough motion to cause waves to go up the river and enter the River Carron. And that's what all the records and reports showed happened for the last 2 centuries. That end of the beach was protected, and waves never were a problem entering the River Carron before the council actions in building the rock protection barrier for the raised walkway and starting the creation of running waves. You can see the area of intense wave at the end of the breakwater and at the end of the rock section. Now we come to the river mouth as of old. This map from around 1820 shows the river joining up with the River Cowie and going seaward. Obviously at that time there was a shingle bank in front of the combined rivers, and so no waves got to the river mouth at all. But whenever there was a spate, it was always happened that the combined rivers would break out through that shingle bank and wash it away, but within a matter of weeks at the most, the bank would reappear. Here in the 1867 map, you see the walls clearly marked, and how great an opportunity there was for the water to be allowed to flow seaward. This is looking downstream today, and you can see the infill in front of the walls at both sides of the river, reducing its width and therefore reducing its velocity. Looking upstream, and again you can see the infill on either bank up to the road bridge. When that road bridge was built, it was built so that it would be able to cope with the 100-year flood had the river mouth been left as it was. Now that the river mouth is closed off and diverted, it is at hazard of reaching water. This is a created photograph looking under the bridge at high tide, a normal high tide, and you can see that there was no resistance to flow out into the sea. But when the council decided to divert the river round the corner and along the top of the beach, that was a complete change of circumstances. And again, the rock abutments at either side of the bridge remove 20% of the available flow channel for the river getting onto the beach and flowing down the beach. But before all these interventions, the river reached the beach at the end of the wall on the left-hand side. It was several metres upstream from the first of the council-built interventions, and the water, as soon as it reached the end of the wall, was free to spread out completely unhindered and make its way seaward. Instead of that, the river is now diverted along this narrow, high-sided rock channel. And you either have a wide river mouth, which raises the water very little, or you divert the water into a restricted channel, and obviously it has to raise the water level considerably to get the same volume of water down that channel and out through a narrow seaward opening at virtually 90 degrees to the direction of flow. This is why in the last 2 major floods, The capacity and exit onto the beach of this channel is so restricted that the water, floodwater in the river, was forced to reach the height of the decking of the footbridge. That's 2.5 metres higher than it could ever have reached in history when the full width of the river was allowed to discharge freely onto the open beach without any restriction. All the current scheme and the hugely increased heights and walls are being built to contain the water that is being forced to rise by the design of this river mouth. Here we see Wallingford's proposed barrier at the river mouth, and you'll note the arrows pointing out that this width was left to allow the river to flow, meander seawards. That would have worked perfectly because all the space was as it used to be. The water got onto the beach and got away. But more importantly, that barrier was designed to prevent the loss of shingle off Stonehaven beach, and hopefully over a period of time to raise the shingle along the beach, the height of the shingle and the width of the shingle bank, and that would have prevented the sea storms reaching the promenade and damaging property, as has happened in the last couple of years. It's now more than 15 years since that barrier was proposed and accepted and was going to be built, and yet because it wasn't built, the shingle has continued to erode off Stonehaven beach at an alarming rate. Thus our past recent storms. The idea of raising that footbridge, supposedly to let more water out, is absolutely ludicrous. Raising the footbridge isn't going to do anything, but if you release the water before it gets to the footbridge, as it always was in history, there wouldn't have been any thought about raising the footbridge. There's enough material lying in front of us on the seaward side of the river channel to build Wallingford's barrier and do some good, rather than leaving this in situ and causing all the problems that have been caused by raising water height in the river since the river was first blocked off. This was taken while the Balfour Beatty were making the Arbuthnot drain. That's why the boulders have been moved about and you see the wheel marks and grading on the beach. The sewer can be seen running across the river, the lines. This is the river mouth as the boulders were. You can see how restricted it is and how the river, they sometimes even now, if the river is very low, have to open up a track because it starts to dam the water back. Even when the full width of the river used to be in existence, ending at the walls, when the river was very low, usually in summertime periods, it would form a shingle bank across the river mouth, and the council would have to send people down to open a channel to let it away, because the stagnant water quickly began to be offensive. But if you get any flow of water at all, it very rapidly gouges out the channel and keeps it flowing. But here again, looking seaward, you can see how it's so protected by that rocks and the point that they stick out. It's not open to wave action at all. Now here we have a Google Earth photograph of the bridge and the restriction, and you can see how even at the present day the restriction is damming back and holding some water, and it's only as you get nearer down the beach below normal high tide mark that the river actually is flowing. But if the river had been allowed to flow straight seaward, there would have been none of these huge increases in flood heights, because, as I have repeatedly said, as soon as the water reached the containing walls upstream of the footbridge, it was free to spread out with unlimited scope to flow seaward down the beach and into the sea. The limit of flood height at that point historically had always been spring high tide level, and spring high tide level only exists for a short period over the high tide at 12-hour intervals. Now, not many spates in the Carron flow at maximum level for 12-hour intervals, but the potential or the hazard of getting any problem backing up when the water is at spring high tide level is nothing compared to the situation you have now, where because of the restriction built on the beach below high tide, downstream from the footbridge, the water is actually being forced to back up to the deck of the footbridge, which was completely inconceivable in earlier times. The council built that channel to divert the river to prevent the waves running along the wall. It wasn't needed. Internationally, universally, the answer to that problem of running waves is a couple of short barriers built seaward which halts the running wave. That causes the wave to drop the shingle it is carrying, and very rapidly it builds up a spending beach which removes permanently the danger of running waves. Far better to have left the open river mouth and instead Wallingford's missing barrier that would help to build up the shingle on the entire beach and prevent, in a matter of a few years' time, the possibility of seaboard wave problems attacking the promenade. If the river mouth was opened up and then remodelled, you would find that a huge proportion of the cost of the new scheme would evaporate.